Welcome back. Let's take you to the venue of the State Capture Commission of Inquiry in Parktown, and that's where we find my colleague Thulasizwe Simelane, who is covering that particular Commission of Inquiry. Thulas, good morning to you. So I want to touch on this issue of Pravin Gordhan. He is at a meeting with former President Jacob Zuma. President Zuma is offering him again the position of finance minister, but he says, no, there are other people that you could look to, Mr. President. But the president, and this is where it becomes interesting, the people I have been talking to have said you are the only one who could calm the markets. Does this tie in with the allegation of the BLF, for example, who are protesting outside that venue, that Zuma was somehow pressured by your so-called white monopoly capital to appoint Pravin Gordhan, and therefore their allegation that Pravin Gordhan is working for white monopoly capital in this country?
Well, Toli, to you and I, that the events of the 9th of December 2015 came to be known as 9/12. Others in the economic and the financial sector called it Nene Gordhan because of the kind of impact that it had on the markets, the value of the rand, the bonds, the South African bonds. And Pravin Gordhan has been testifying about the events, the political events around that particular event. And you're absolutely right. He does say that in the meeting with former President Jacob Zuma, the words from the former president were that the people I've been speaking to say you are the only one who can restore calm in the markets in that particular way. And you will understand that that's been the criticism from organizations such as the BLF, that the former president was forced by the markets to basically put Pravin Gordhan into that position of finance minister. But also you're seeing this protest, which is largely EFF supporters who have come out today to be part of the protest. But also, Koli, you will have heard that refrain about the role played by the markets in forcing the hand of former President Jacob Zuma from the former president himself, because he did talk about it subsequently a number of times, saying that basically I had stirred the hornet's nest and had touched the nerve of the markets by removing Nhlanhlanene at that particular point. So it does tally with that narrative that says by removing Nhlanhlanene, basically you had touched the nerve of the markets, which led to the former president being forced by the kind of turmoil that happened in the markets to reinstate Pravin Gordhan, who initially was reluctant to take up that position, but according to his testimony, he had been contacted by people such as the then deputy president and now President Cyril Ramaphosa, as well as the deputy secretary general of the ANC, Jesse Duarte, who were saying before the meeting actually took place that President Jacob Zuma, as he was then, is going to ask you to do something. Do not say no, do not refuse to take it up. So that's how it came about. As we hear in the background a few seconds ago, the chanting down with Pravin Gordhan, down from those EFF supporters who are gathered here.
And then, of course, Thulas, we can't ignore this because the two individuals you are touching on, Jesse Duarte and the Deputy President then, Cyril Ramaphosa, who are urging Pravin Gordhan to accept this, whatever it is that is going to be asked of him by former President Zuma. Opportunistically, could those, of course, who are anti-Ramaphosa, anti-Pravin Gordhan, leave out Jesse Duarte and say, well, you see the kind of pressure that we're talking about being applied by people in the so-called white monopoly capital to say Pravin Gordhan must be the finance minister and no one else. Could that be used by those who are applying this so-called fight back campaign, if you like?
Well, Toli, I can tell you that part of the what is happening here is that you've got the formal proceedings inside the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, but there's no doubt that there's what many could call perhaps the battle of the narrative, basically to try and define who really engaged in state capture. You have the version of events that has been given by witnesses such as Nhlanhla, who testified, Mcebisi Jonas, and now Pravin Gordhan, that points the finger at those that they believe were behind the capture of the state. But certainly there is a push by those who believe that there was a different form of state capture that was taking place, and those that put people such as Pravin Gordhan at the heart of it, and certainly the group behind us, the EFF supporters who've been quite vociferous, would fall into that category that basically says the state capture that was taking place was being perpetrated by people such as Pravin Gordhan. Interestingly, Pravin Gordhan today responding to the allegations that were made by the EFF yesterday, particularly the allegation that suggests that he basically bargained his way to the finance ministry in his first term by basically being at the heart of ensuring that the former president Jacob Zuma and his legal team lay their hands on the so-called spy tapes, those recordings that basically suggested that there was a kind of orchestration at the NPA of when and how to charge Jacob Zuma, and basically used that as a bargaining chip to gain the position of finance minister. Pravin Gordhan, responding to that quite strongly and quite sharply, saying that he doesn't bargain for a position for a job. He doesn't need to do that. He has never had to make deals for a job, and he didn't do that for this particular one, and challenging the EFF to say that basically all these organizations that are saying that they have evidence of wrongdoing on my part, they should simply come and make those allegations in this particular commission of inquiry.
Tulas, let me actually interrupt you, because that particular soundbite, we have it lined up where the finance minister, or should we say former finance minister then and now public enterprises, Pravin Gordhan, actually says, I'm not a commodity for sale. Let's just listen into that soundbite right now.
The point that relates more directly to what Mr. Pretorius asks the chairperson is that I don't make deals for jobs. I don't need to. I have my own humble beginnings as just a pharmacist. I think in 1974, my first salary was 100 rands, 125 rands. That looks funny today, but that's where we started. And certainly I don't make deals with smugglers or taxpayers or submit to intimidation or bullying of any kind. The last point I want to make in this regard is that as far as I'm concerned, I'm accountable to citizens of this country, as you pointed out yesterday, who actually elect us into Parliament. Then Parliament as an institution, because I'm an executive in this government. Of course, I'm accountable to the political organization that has enabled me to play this kind of role. But I'm not accountable to bullies.